Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome back. It's my pleasure to be hosting the first panel of the day. The Future Starts with Founders. Over the next 45 minutes, we'll explore the crucial role Canadian entrepreneurs are playing in shaping the future of women's health, both here and globally. As Lisa and Rachel beautifully pointed out earlier, the gap in women's health is undeniable. It's why we're seeing an unstoppable wave of innovation with passionate founders around the world dedicating their lives to improving the experiences all women have globally. Today, we're fortunate to be joined by three incredible founders who are not only breaking down barriers in women's health, but also reimagining how we address some of the most critical needs. Welcome, Danika, Sara, and Jackie. Together, we'll explore their founding stories, the approaches they're taking to set themselves apart in the market, and the vision for the future of women's health. We'll also hear their perspective on how Canada can continue to position itself as a global leader in women's health, particularly by supporting startups and ensuring that women's health remains a top priority. So without further ado, let's jump right in. For all of you, my first question is, what inspired you to get your company started? And what specific challenges in women's health are you most passionate about solving? Tough one. Let's go, Danika, you go.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Danika, and the synopsis of why is pretty short. I would say naive, unfettered feminist rage is why I started my company. And so, to give a little bit of context, I was working in an academic environment in health research, and as was my co-founder, and we were in disparate kind of spaces. So I was in human performance, and she was in oncology. And despite both of us having kind of the highest level of security clearance that we could get for access to data in the healthcare records, neither of us could do our job properly because of the deficit in the data in and of itself, which is a huge issue. So if I have the most clearance that anybody can get and I can't do anything, that's a huge problem and a huge opportunity within the healthcare context and in the life sciences context. And so we founded My Normative, and My Normative is a health research infrastructure platform that makes it easier to count for sex and gender differences. Thank you.
Sara, over to you.
So I'm Sara, the CEO and founder of Revol Cares, and I have a heavy flow. I start every talk with that. And I created the first medically recognized heavy flow focused leak-proof underwear, available now in about 2,600 pharmacies and grocery stores across Canada. And I think it's pretty obvious I am obsessed with heavy flows and really just being kind of in the forefront of a product that I think a lot of women need, and I think a lot of people don't realize that a lot of women need this. And yeah, so that's me.
Love it. I'm Jackie. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Sprout Family. But just a quick show of hands. Raise your hand if you or anyone you know have been through a fertility journey, whether that's fertility preservation, fertility treatment, surrogacy, or adoption. Okay, so that's a big number of people, and that's one of the reasons that we started Sprout. But my founding journey actually starts with my family's own story that really inspired me to start building the company. My parents adopted my brother as a means to start building our family many years ago. And that journey taught me a lot about empathy, openness, and the beauty of diverse family structures. And shortly after years of going through infertility, they decided to pursue IVF, which at the time was a relatively groundbreaking technology. Not that many people knew much about the success outcomes and what that could mean for family building, and my twin and I were born. And so that journey taught us a lot about the challenges that families go through when they're trying to build their families and how hard it can actually be for so many people that are navigating this, particularly in the workforce. And so when I think about one of the biggest problems that we're trying to solve is really access to comprehensive education around reproductive health. Think back to any of your sex ed classes in high school, elementary school. We're basically taught that the moment you have unprotected intercourse, you're going to get pregnant. And this oversimplifies the real complex realities of what actually occurs and creates barriers for people to advocate for themselves. And so one of the areas that is important to highlight is when we think about the Canadian landscape, regardless of having a publicly funded healthcare system, fertility and family building support, and when I talk about family building, I mean everything from fertility preservation, fertility treatment, surrogacy and adoption, is largely covered through either private pay models or through your insurance. And so we really built Sprout to make it easy for employers to cover fertility benefits and provide fertility services for their employees. And our mission is really simple. It's to enforce the narrative around fertility and family building care being a core part of how we think about human health care while also elevating the employee experience.
Thank you all for sharing. I'm already feeling the goosebumps based on your stories. So Jackie, my first question is for you. With the increasing importance of fertility support, how is Sprout Fertility addressing the challenges in fertility and family building landscape? And what specific technologies or strategies differentiate your solution from others?
Yeah, so we think about technology being core to our solutions. We have the opportunity to really define how we think about family building care in Canada and make sure that when we talk about delivering this care, it's inclusive in terms of someone's age, race, gender, sexual orientation, or financial circumstances. So through our app, our members access a wide arrangement of products and services, one including content that's actually curated based on their particular pathway, providers, recommendations and referrals to in-person care with negotiated treatment rates across the country, which significantly helps with affordability, financial planning, budgeting, and tax tools, which is critical for people that are about to embark on spending over $20,000 on cost of care, as well as human support through our care navigation team, as well as our medical team. But obviously, as technology is core to our mission, we understand that when it comes to something as personal as family building, it's really important to know that technology will never replace how we access care, and it's actually just supposed to supplement it in a way that still is developed with a lot of empathy in mind. And so one of our core pillars as we think about how technology can support us is around data. Data is critical. We lack a lot of data, and so how can a lot of the femtech companies in Canada really be collecting and building change as we think about how data is presented, how we calculate the ROI, et cetera. And so at Sprout, we track patient demographic data everywhere from their treatments, understanding what their protocols are, and that really helps us to personalize guidance and intervention that they might need. But as we talk about collecting that data, it's kind of a circular issue where it's not as simple as just collecting. In order to get good data, you need adoption. So as we think about how do we drive adoptions for programs like Sprout, it's needing to be able to communicate effective ROIs. Well, being able to communicate effective ROI in terms of the programs that we're delivering means that we need patient engagement. Well, to get good patient engagement, you actually need a really good level of data that can then inform the products that you're building. So it's this big circular problem, but we believe that we're really well positioned to solve those problems because if we can build what we are attempting to build at scale, we'll really be able to house a very broad and unique data set that will help us paint the picture of what our actual patient needs and how can we deliver the best outcomes.
Cool. Thank you. Sara, my next question is for you. As the demand for sustainable period products rises, how is your company balancing innovation and sustainability? What unique challenges do you face in creating products that are both eco-friendly and effective?
I love this question. I get asked this question actually a lot. And a little bit about me is I'm Icelandic, so very feminist, very sustainable. We live off our earth and we want to respect it in Iceland and hopefully everywhere. So I have two fundamental beliefs about our business at Revol Cares is we're going to be sustainable and we're going to be functional. There is a lot of sustainable product out there, that then doesn't function. There's a lot of, well, I wouldn't actually say there's a lot of functional period products out there, but there are some that are not sustainable. And so we have those two core pillars, and we really see them as like guiding lights of how we move through. I always look at sustainability as kind of like, as long as we're net neutral or net positive with our actions, whether it's like our product, our packaging, our manufacturing, even like at our warehouse and our staff, like all those things, it all comes into play. But function always has to be the key for us. Like that is, we don't put a product out unless we know that it is meeting our standards, which again, there are no standards, not for menstrual products, but that's really where we focus on innovating and focus on creating resources within our own systems that we can say, okay, if it doesn't meet 140 milliliters made from bamboo and organic cotton, we're not going to put it out. And so that is how we balance it. It is definitely a fine balance, and I fundamentally believe that all businesses really should be including sustainability into the core from the very beginning, because it becomes really hard to drive profitability if you try to add sustainability later on. So if you bring it into the very beginning foundations of your business, you can then build profitability like from there. And that has been, core to how we've built it. Also, it's a reusable leak-proof underwear, so inherently we're very sustainable. We divert like 260 tampons and pads from the landfill with every pair. We're at like 25 million pads and tampons diverted to date. But it's about so much more. It's about, also like toxicity. We look at that as a sustainable factor. So are we making sure that we test every batch of fabric we produce, to then also testing the garment after it's been produced, making sure there's no transfer chemicals from the manufacturing process, because we believe that your body is just as important as the environment, and making sure that we're not, bringing any unwanted chemicals in there. And it's okay, it happens every time. But yeah, so really looking at sustainability as a whole and making sure you're not approaching it from, are we ticking off a box that, just our marketing wants us to do. And actually, if you look at our marketing, we pretty much never talk about sustainability. We pretty much only talk about functionality, and it's just a really added bonus to our product that you get to be very sustainable when you use it.
I love the importance of just how centric and inherent this the sustainability aspect is in your product. That's awesome. Danika, my next question is for you. Collecting data on women's health often means navigating under-researched, as we learned, areas. How does My Normative ensure the quality and accuracy of the data? And what impact do you hope that this data will make on women's health research and insights and broader community?
Thank you. So I think this comes down to like the core strategy that underpins My Normative. So I talked about My Normative as a research infrastructure platform. So we do our very best not to do the research ourselves, but instead to facilitate experts in their given fields to do research at a scale and a level of generalizability that has not been seen before, at a cost effectiveness and a logistical capacity that it has been a huge barrier to innovation in the female health space and in women's health more broadly. And so there's a few things that we did to kind of set ourselves up for success. So one is we set ourselves up to be research grade. And so that means we've avoided a lot of the pitfalls that we see within the transmission and the retrospective data used from like direct to consumer data, right? So where you don't have the data validated, you don't necessarily have the questionnaires or the mechanisms validated, and the quality you're not super sure on. And then likewise, we kind of see the pitfalls on not necessarily knowing how to account for sex and gender as distinct and separate variables in the research process. And so with that, effectively how we've built out the platform is that everything that is built in has gone through some level of validation from a third party and peer review. So that's kind of step one. And then step two is that currently the only people who we allow to come onto our platform as partners are people who are actively doing research, whether that be public or private, with the intent to go through some sort of regulatory ethical process to continue to build out the quality of the data set and the quality of the work that is being done and the level of validity that we can see within our own platform. And so the reason for this is that we strongly believe, like fundamentally, that there's a prospective amount of research that needs to happen before then we go back and start looking at retrospective sets, whether that's StatsCan or any other data that we have or epidemiological data, to say like, okay, we saw this trend in this population here. Now that we have the symptoms identified, the pathologies identified, the treatment differences identified, how can we go back in the huge data sets that we already have and start to flag the prevalence of these issues? And so for us, it's very much been, how do we help work with and dismantle the traditional barriers around data collection that accurately represent and hold space for that female differential and that gender differential, so that in the future you can go backwards more efficiently and cost effectively.
That sounds super simple, right? So simple.
It's just my entire career so far.
Yeah,
it's fine, easy.
Not a big deal. Well, clearly, each of you have created your businesses based on a personal problem you've experienced, right? And that's incredible, right? That's why founders like you and others across the globe continue to pave the path even when you hit barriers. And frankly, one of the biggest barriers as founders is scaling, right? Like, how do you scale this idea and make an impact here in Canada, but also globally? So my next question is for all of you. How do you envision scaling your impact? And what are the challenges or opportunities unique to Canada that have influenced your distribution strategy? And I welcome also, I know some of you folks play in the US as well, to talk more globally as well. Sara, let's start with you.
So I mean, it ties very deeply into how we operate as an organization. So we monitor our, obviously, revenue, but our impact growth as well. We really see what we're doing as like moving the needle forward for women's health in a very consumer, like with a very consumer-focused lens. And yeah, there's been many challenges, obviously. I have an inventory-based business, which if I don't have inventory, I have no revenue coming in. And that is definitely a challenge. We bootstrap from the very beginning, and that it has lots of, it's a roller coaster ride. I could talk for an hour about that, but I won't. But what we really see is, utilizing our technology, which we're laser focused on being a leak-proof solution, but seeing where we can utilize that in different areas, perimenopause, urinary incontinence, those kind of things, and really bringing reusable, heavy absorption products to the world, where I think there's been a huge gap. And a lot of what's been talked about today is people just don't recognize that there's a huge gap. I walk into rooms all the time where people think menstruation is solved because we have 2 types of maxi pads and a few tampons on the shelf. And it is, in my opinion, obviously there's so much taboo around the topics that we've gone really far. But the thing that I'm constantly highlighting is we don't even know how big of a market this is. They're constantly miscalculating how big my TAM is. I'll look at the data one year and it's 39 billion. Then the following year it's 66 billion. And it's like, yeah, because nobody really recognizes how big of a market this is. Our number one selling product is a heavy flow pair of underwear available now in grocery and pharmacy. And it still surprises people, like, oh, people really have a heavy flow? I'm like, yeah, people really have a heavy flow. Those 190 million people with endometriosis typically have a heavy flow. And, so we're really trying to be there as, we almost discuss it like we're not a medical device, but we discuss it like a therapeutic to all these conditions that we have throughout our lifespan. It's not just menstruation, it's, perimenopause, all those things, and really being the safe, and I kind of mentioned it, but we're the first medically recognized leak-proof underwear. So shout out to the Society of Obstetricians and Gynecologists of Canada. We're the first reusable to be part of their brand recognition program. And a lot of that is just making sure we are delivering that impact and the efficacy and safety with our product.
Danika, how about you? How are you thinking about scaling?
Yeah, from a strategy perspective, I think there are four kind of components. And so I'll talk a little bit about the behind the curve work that we're doing, the client-led product development that we're doing, and then the ways by which we are kind of generating that interest and traction from the business development perspective. So I think the first one is to acknowledge that, I think all founders, you talked about the roller coaster. If you're waiting for other people's money to solve your problems, this is a gnarly place to be. So one of the things that we've really focused on is leveraging a few things. So the first of which being looking for ways to expend any money that we get in and making sure that anytime we say yes to a new iteration of the product or a new iteration of the technology or the new iteration of services, that it is client demand driven. And then from an IP perspective, effectively what we do is we take that client demand and we go and we get some sort of granting or non-dilutive funding to go, okay, here's what lives on the client side of this, and here's the key pieces of IP, product, and technology that My Normative is going to build, kind of leveraging this work and this traction that we have at this environment. So it's been really important to kind of disaggregate what is client-focused and what is internal to the organization from a strategy perspective so that we can make the most out of every dollar to kind of go faster than what would otherwise be possible or supported by the ecosystem. The next piece that we kind of look at is around how to, with that limited capacity, say yes to big and meaningful projects and opportunities. And so there's two ways by which we're doing that. So one, we call it spearfishing, which is ridiculous, but that's fine, which is we look for key account holders that are in the space in different demographics and different fields of expertise to show the breadth and depth and the capacity of the platform to serve across autoimmune, cardiovascular, reproductive health, those sorts of different verticals. Say, okay, like, look, we have one project in a leading oncology center in female health. Now that we're in this industry, we can start with one project, one pilot, one opportunity, and as long as you deliver a good time and it's effective and it's efficient and everything goes well, then we start to expand out into that space. And so we've kind of identified 4 areas in which we have these land and expand kind of spearfishing approaches that we're taking to finding those strategic collaborators. And the next piece that we're doing, which is part of why I'm here today, is we call it the lawn sign campaign, which is being prevalent and being present in the community more broadly, so that even if there are opportunities and organizations that are going to take 2 years to come through the funnel or the pipeline for us, we can start working on those relationships now because we know how hard it is to get funding for women's health research. And so if we can help you with a grant application, we can help you with some sort of iteration on your product or technology to get it through into that next stage. We know that's going to take time, and we are cool with that. We know we need to make that investment up front. So strategically for us, that lawn sign campaign has been a really important part of how we build that funnel into the future, even if we don't have a ton of capacity for that scale today. It's about building that capacity down the runway so that when we go to fundraise that next round, we can say, there are 100 opportunities, here's the average size on this, you need to fund this so that we can go now, right? So that's kind of the scaling component for us.
It's incredible how you're essentially fueling an ecosystem of founders, and that's exciting. Jackie.
Yeah. So I'm like thinking back to that matrix that Lisa showed that was talking about all the different kind of verticals within women's health and where they are in terms of awareness, affordability, accessibility, et cetera. And so I think when we think about healthcare more broadly, we also need to really talk about how we're integrating between payers, plans, and employers. That's really critical in solving the accessibility gap and the problem. And so for us, and we'll talk later about it, but we were talking a lot about it earlier today, it's very difficult for Femtech founders to get funding. And so distribution is so critical from day one. We don't have like 2 years to explore our go-to-market. It's like you have to have an idea right away and you have to run with it and hope that it's going to work and iterate along the way. And so as we explored, okay, what does our business look like in Canada? We looked at the US and we saw Maven, Progeny, Carrot, all these amazing US companies that are really solving for the affordability aspect of fertility care in the US. And we're like, why does this not exist in Canada? Literally not one company is solving for this. The insurance carriers are doing like a relatively okay job, but adoption is still really low. And I think adoption is really low because people aren't talking about it. Women don't want to talk about this at work. They don't want to be pegged as the individual that's going to be going on parental leave in the next 9 to 12 to 2 years. And so we were learning from employers that this was a problem for them, but they didn't really know how to address it and how to solve it without, adding on really costly insurance packages that increase their premiums. But we're seeing that there's an increased adoption of employers adding digital health platforms to their suite of solutions that are actually solving painkiller problems, not just like vitamin solutions. These things are proven to drive productivity, talent acquisition, retention, and decrease costs associated with mental health claims and short-term disability. But what we're also seeing from Sun Life, one of the insurance carriers and also many others, is that they're focused on specialization. They're focused on increasing health outcomes. We're seeing a lot of the carriers actually start publishing health outcomes report. That's amazing. That's like taking their data that only they own and showing it to the world about how they're actually improving that. But they're also focused on building comprehensive suites of solutions that they can provide strategic value to employers and plan sponsors. So how this all fits into our model is that we view insurance as a really big distribution channel for us to be able to fit into their comprehensive suite of solutions that they're offering to, one, reduce even the choice burden from HR leaders and benefit leaders who are like, oh my God, I had 10 products flipped at me this year. I literally don't know which one I should choose. So we've been making exciting progress with our distribution. So we actually started the company a year and a half ago. It's been a roller coaster of the past year, but really, really exciting. And so we just launched with our first insurance carrier, which is Green Shield, 3 weeks ago. So very early days, but exciting traction. And we're launching, thank you. We'll be launching with our second carrier in January, all with the goal of incorporating and embedding Sprout into their marketplaces, their group plans, and their employee assistance programs. So hopefully all the millions of Canadians that need access to fertility care will be able to do so through their insurance and group benefits.
I had a few more questions, but given the time, I'll ask one final question. What advice do you have for founders who are stepping into women's health space?
Go. Go for it.
Okay, so my advice is always to more than just understand the solution that you have, because I think a lot of us can be really creative and come up with amazing, amazing, amazing solutions. But if you don't know just as well where you're going to deliver that solution, I think that sometimes we get so gung-ho about our solution is the best, but then it's like, how do you actually bring it to the customer? And that is where I put a lot of focus. Prior to this year, there was no information about how people bought period products. But I listened. We were direct to consumer in the beginning, and I used to do farmers markets, and people would drive an hour to come see me, and they would be like, I want this one, that one, and that one. Already looked at your website. And I was like, why didn't you buy online? Like, we have free shipping. And they'd be like, well, I don't know, it just feels weird buying my period products online. Like, light bulb moment of, okay, there's something missing here. So then we developed our in-store line. We launched it, and within 12 months, we were in 2,000 stores. We have hit, thank you. We've hit #1 in the entire period aisle within 4 weeks of launching into stores. And that's over always in Tampax and all the traditional brands, but the thing that I'm stressing is that you have to know, like, where does that customer first feel the problem and then go to find the solution. For us, it's the period aisle. You know, you're not necessarily going straight to the internet or ChatGPT, maybe you are, but you're going to the period aisle. What is there, you know? And I heard that and delivered, and it's been an enormous success for us. And so, yeah, that's my advice, is just really listen to who you're trying to solve the problem for.
Okay, I'm going to touch on the fundraising aspect of it, because I think that it's important for women especially to be aware of the landscape that we kind of are operating in. So our philosophy and kind of my advice as we think about how women get funded is that we really have to understand the venture capital landscape in Canada, and also understand the role of female check writers. There's a lot of them in this room and they're amazing. Women make up about 20% of VC roles right now in Canada, and what's even more stark is when we think about the fact that women represent about 17.5% of private sector companies in Canada, but receive 2.3% of venture capital funding. So one, we're like resilient, tenacious, like hardworking, like the people that thrive and survive, like that's amazing, because we are like literally operating our businesses on a shoestring budget. But I also think that some of the strategies and advice that I can give in terms of overcoming these barriers is, one, actually intentionally seeking out female investors. They're typically very uniquely positioned to actually understand and care about the businesses that we're solving and the mission that we're on. And this is really important because the writing is on the wall that people like to invest in things that are familiar to them. And so that inherently creates a lot of bias for femtech founders. We're typically building in the women's health space. A lot of male investors don't really understand like what problem we're trying to solve. They can't resonate with it. And so that's where the importance of storytelling really comes in. And that was something that we like very much so exemplified in our fundraising process, which is that whether you're pitching to a customer, whether you're pitching to a potential new hire or an investor, when people don't fully understand or see themselves fitting into the problem space that you're building in, you really need to find ways to curate and craft your value proposition so that they can either put themselves in those shoes, or they can visualize someone in their life that has gone through that problem, and that really helps to continue the conversations and spark curiosity. So I guess like my TLDR advice is that really use the fundraising process as a discovery process rather than a series of rejections. Like we've probably all gotten a ton of rejections over the period of time, and like you literally just have to wipe that off and be like, they don't get it. And instead of really focusing on trying to convince people, really spend your time building relationships with people who are like equally as aligned and passionate about the product and solutions that you're building.
And I think the piece to tack on, I think in particular when you're working a little bit upstream in the female health or in the women's health space, there's the extra deficit to work your way through as a founder, which is that there is research and validation that needs to be done and paid for, right? And so there's a few components there. So if you have an academic position, make some strategic decisions about how you want to leverage that and how long you want to be in that environment, and how funding there can be meaningful and helpful to you. And then once you decide to exit that environment, there's additional work that needs to be done around leveraging the existing skills that you have around applying for non-dilutive funding and creating resiliency within your organization on bringing that product to market by working with people who understand. And I actually had this, I think maybe it was probably we were talking to you, like finding the right people to help move that forward. And so I'm actually going to say that, especially in the life sciences, my first check writers were not VCs, they were family offices. It's people who care enough to go, oh, you are way upstream. Yes, and I can be patient. I don't need a return on this in 3 years. And so if you are in the life sciences sector specifically, venture capital can be helpful, and growing your network to find those family offices is going to be a very meaningful investment for you.
I know as a moderator I'm not supposed to share, but I'll share a quick story, Jackie, what you were sharing earlier around making your investor feel the pain. So what I did during fundraising is, of course, pitching to a lot of male investors. I said, you know, let your wife, your partner, your sister use this product, and let them be the judge of what this experience is for them. And I got investments as a result of that experience their wife had and their sisters had. So we're absolutely, in the right dimension of make the customer feel the pain, and be creative and think outside of the box. So thanks for sharing that. I have lovely questions here, my goodness. Yes, I know. This is hard, so I will do my best. Okay, so this is a really great question, and if the person is here, please raise your hand, because thank you for asking. What's one thing everyone in this room could do for you to help you move the needle?
Who asked that? I love that question.
Yeah. Should have known.
Literally talk about your problems. Let's talk about women's health. Let's talk about our periods. Let's talk about infertility. Let's talk about IVF, because if we don't talk about it, no one's talking about it. So that's what's going to drive change for honestly all of our businesses, from my perspective. And it's easy to do. It's a little uncomfortable.
But it is easy to do, yeah. For us, we are actually raising our seed round right now. So if there is anybody in the room that wants to come talk to me, we have some very exciting things coming up. And it's a quick close, so we've got to write checks before the end of the year. So if you will have some capital to deploy, come my way.
I think for myself, I think there are two pieces that we're working on right now. So the first is, if you are working in the life sciences area and you are running studies, we're always interested in learning more about barriers you're experiencing, opportunities, ways that we can support. So please do come and speak with me afterwards. And the other piece, which I think I touched on really briefly, and it was touched on today, which is collaboration. So part of the lawn sign campaign that I'm doing as being a part of here is, there are so many people who are working adjacent to you who offer services or insight or have experienced the pain that you might be working on in your field. One of the best ways I think for us to get ahead in the women's health and in the female health space is to be open to collaboration. So if you are adjacent to anything someone you're talking to today is doing, be vulnerable about where your expertise in that area lies.
We have room for one more question. What's one question you wish you got asked more often?
I mean, okay. Probably how are you doing? And are you okay? I feel and I say that because there's so many questions you could get asked about your business. I could say, I wish people asked me about my go-to-market more, progress in the business. But honestly, being a founder is a tough journey, and I think a lot of people forget that it's a lot of ups and downs. And so I think just checking in and building those connections with people and just being how are things going? Because we don't, I personally don't like to talk to my friends about, oh my God, I had such a hard day today. But when they ask me, I'm oh, that's so nice. Let me share.
You go first. Yeah, I think, so when I think about one question that I wish I was asked more often, I think it's actually on the policy side. So one of the things that came up even at dinner conversation last night was well, what are the things that we can be advocating on a geopolitical level to change the framework and the systems in which we're existing, right? So often it's what can I do as a founder, or what can I do as a supporter? And so many of the things that we have to do are actually at that political level and up. And so one of the, I think Rachel's calling, do you know an MLA that I can bother? That is one of the things that I wish that we were being invited into conversations about more, because often we think about the moral imperative and the carrot of look, if you do this, it's good. And sometimes I'm okay, but what are the regulatory and kind of more specced out areas that I can be invited into to speak about how we can be setting up the system for success?
So I think it's kind of a bit of both. I think when having conversations with founders, it is just a lot of the times, whether it's asking or sometimes even just saying, hey, I'm going to introduce you to this person, because sometimes you're in it and you don't even think, oh, a connection to an MLA or whatever, somebody would be so helpful right now. So maybe it is like not really a question, it's telling us, you know, I think this could really open this door for you, because sometimes you just don't even know what is around the corner, and having the people in your network around you to help you kind of vision guide through that. So yeah, mine's not a question, but it's a tell.
Thank you all. Thank you, Sara. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Danika, for your insights and also sharing your personal stories. We'll definitely ask more, how are you doing? I promise. That's a great one to leave the note. Yeah, okay. Have a wonderful rest of the day, folks.